So let me begin by introducing you to a great friend of mine, to Annie Rodgers. I was introduced to Annie about a year ago, and she is an extraordinary person, incredibly talented, and just brilliant at steering these panel discussions. And Annie is an executive coach, so any of you looking to take your next step in your career, make sure you hang around and talk to Annie. She helps clients to navigate life with clarity of thought, strength of mind, and passion for their purpose. Wow, just think about that. And her focus is career coaching, encouraging clients to be strategic with their equity as their organisations they work for. She's got 25 years experience as an executive in the media and the advertising industry, and her clients and her organisations where she's worked for include CNBC, Dow Jones, and the Discovery Channels. So she comes with bucket loads of experience. And Annie, please take the floor and then invite your panellists to come and join us. We've got water. We need some. What? Ooh. What do we need? Here we go. Nothing. You're done.
I'm done.
Yep.
Perfect. Is this on? Perfect. Thank you very much. Well, before we, in true, really helpful club style, we are grasping the nettle at the beginning of the day. And this is more about family matters rather than family matters. So can I invite my panellists to join me on the stage? We have Sabrina and Claire from Mishcon. And we have Jules and Chloe. And I think we're working off mics. Is that correct? Perfect. Fantastic. So just to get us started, so we all know that certain life events are inevitable. And we know that planning and preparing for them is best practice. Yet so many of us either procrastinate, avoid, ignore, or at worst, neglect until it's too late, and then we face some fairly dire consequences as a result. So today we have a brilliant panel assembled next to me that will cover pretty much every aspect of that topic, from the practical and the technical to the really vital life support, I call vital sign services, that make sure that we are in the best shape to tackle all of the above in mind, body and soul. So just to kick off, I'm going to ask each of my lovely panellists to quickly introduce themselves, and then we'll get started.
Shall I go?
Perfect.
Hi, I'm Sabrina. I'm a private client lawyer at Mishcon, so I deal with all things quite boring. Everyone likes to put it off. Wills, tax, trust, estate planning, and probate. But useful.
Perfect. Thank you, Sabrina. Claire.
I'm Claire. I also work at Mishcon, but in the family team. So there's quite a lot of crossover between Sabrina and I. But my side of it is, preparation for marriage, prenuptial agreements, for example, then divorce, postnuptial agreements. We can talk about the differences between those, but they're essentially the same thing. Also, the slightly softer side of things, surrogacy agreements, adoption, but also anything in relation to arguments on care and living arrangements for children, where children go to school, any arguments between parents. I've got grandparents issues at the moment, so anything to do with finances or care of children, and things flowing into a marriage and when a marriage breaks down.
Thank you. Chloe.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chloe. I am a certified divorce coach. And what that means is I help people divorce without going to war and to come out of it stronger, having experienced a growth and grasping that opportunity that they can get from a new chapter in their life.
Thank you. Jules.
Hi, I'm Jules from Feel Glorious. I'm a functional health and nutrition coach, and I work mainly with busy professionals over 40 on all sort of wider aspects of their health, like stress and sleep and nutrition and gut health and hormones and all the things that we tend to neglect a little bit and start to go a bit wonky after we get to 40. And ultimately what I want, I've got a science background, but ultimately what I really want is for people to be kind of their best self more days, like them on a good day, just more days than not.
Fantastic. I always like to start these things with a bit of a personal story before we get into the nitty-gritty of tax and estate planning and POA and all that sort of stuff. And I know that Sabrina and Claire, you're kind of rock stars in this world. I mean, you're subject matter experts. You work for one of the most highly regarded law firms in the world. and you're on the coalface of this every day of the week. So my guess is you have this all sorted, all of these family matters things. It's a slam dunk exercise for you. Would that be right?
Totally in control, and I definitely didn't go to the tennis club before having to jump in an Uber and come here doing my makeup in the back of the Uber. Whilst I complained bitterly about the fact that it was raining and I hadn't had time to wash my hair this morning. I've got twins at home who've just turned 2. My husband is in Scotland bicycling around, which is something that I don't recall agreeing to, but has definitely happened, and he's away for 10 days. He also seems to have arranged for his mother to come this weekend to help me. And whilst I really love her, I have just realised that the weekend is going to be entertaining not only twin 2-year-olds, but also my mother-in-law, and that's not going to be at all relaxing. So by the time he comes home on Sunday, I'm going to be extremely resentful, and probably have to go to some marriage counselling next week.
Is it any better on the old estate planning side over there at Mishcon?
I'm not sure I can beat that. So I've just returned from maternity leave. I've just celebrated a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old birthday a couple of weeks ago,
Congratulations.
which was helped because both party followed by a dose of chicken pox. So I'm literally coming out of similar terminus circumstances. I did arrive at the right place, though, although my mascara was also applied in the bathroom. So similarly in control.
Fantastic. So you're just like the rest of us, really. And I think, joking aside, when we sort of had a quick chat before we met on the panel this morning, you impressed upon me the importance of, we're not alone in our ability or inability or lack of inclination to grasp the nettle of all of these really important matters, legal or otherwise. And even if you are an expert, you need an expert. So what we had talked about was the importance of bringing that topic into discussion, just tabling it, getting rid of the taboo and stigma around the areas that we're going to talk about in depth this morning. So you are just like the rest of us. But I then now want to dive into the practice, a little bit of the specificity around your respective areas of expertise. And if I can start with you, Claire, on the family side of it, what are the key and prevailing themes that you see as the most important for the audience to consider when they're looking at family matters?
Well, my area is very much the kind of going into marriage or having children. And what's interesting about that is that now, because what Sarah was talking about the older generation, that we're heavy on the sort of 65s, and it moves into Sabrina's area as well in terms of passing on wealth, you're probably aware that prenuptial and postnuptial agreements are kind of on the rise, and marriage is slightly falling in the younger generations, and that's bringing quite a lot of things for a whole family to consider. Some of my clients come in because it's their parents who've said, look, I'd like to pass on wealth to you, but you're about to get married. Can we sort of be clear on what's going on here? And I think it's terribly, terribly important that if you are thinking on passing on wealth to your children, and they, are either single or with someone or getting married or whatever it is, that you consider what the ramifications of passing on that wealth are. Obviously, you do want to pass on wealth, or I assume most people do, because, otherwise you give it to the tax man anyway. So it's sensible, but what you need to think about is what is the best way of doing that. And these agreements exist, cohabitation agreements, prenups, postnups, to try and protect what you want to happen to that wealth. And there are all kinds of considerations. Some people prefer to pay private school fees. We know that's on the increase for certain generations, rather than give a lump sum, which could end up going off in a direction that you didn't foresee. So I think those kind of conversations are really, really important. If you're going to get remarried, you need to think about whether or not you should be being really clear about the wealth that maybe should be passed on to your children and not tied up with a new spouse. And they might have, these blended families that people end up with, you want real clarity on what is going where. And so having conversations with a lawyer, if you're thinking about any of that kind of thing, is really, really important. we know, and perhaps slightly depressingly, that especially for women, getting married or getting divorced, those are two of the biggest financial decisions you'll ever make. So, you know, you really do need to be making them in the context of information, and getting that information as soon as possible, really.
Is there any tip, or just from your experience, that you would provide that is a good conversation starter? Because in my view, the first port of call is, I need to speak to a lawyer. What kinds of conversations would you encourage, and even in your own situation, to kind of table it before you take that next step and go, we need some practical legal advice? Because, you know, joking aside, the clock starts ticking and it's £500 an hour. So again, if you get the ball rolling, what kind of open questions would you have people consider taking?
I think, you know, what do I want to happen to my wealth? If you're of an older generation thinking of passing it down to your children, do you want that to go into grandchildren's private education, for example? If you're getting married, I mean, we all hate talking about money. Money is such a kind of big issue, and even within a marriage, it's complicated. Different earnings, you know, you're not earning enough. It's too much on me. You know, all of those kind of things. I do think thinking about having a conversation with someone else, mediator, therapists, that kind of thing is quite important. Don't be afraid to open it out from just your immediate situation, because it can be incredibly helpful to have someone else there. We all know that if it's just a conversation with your mum or just a conversation with your spouse, it can kind of descend into, I didn't put something in the dishwasher. You know, you can get sidetracked by the domestic ins and outs, and having someone else there prevents that from happening. But I think it's really about you thinking about what your future looks like. I did a marriage preparation course, which I forced my poor husband to go on. And I did that because when he proposed, I realised that I think I thought we would have lots of conversations before we got married, and then he proposed, and I thought, well, we sort of haven't had those conversations. And it was really, really helpful, but I don't think people don't tend to do that. And those courses, when I started looking into them, are quite limited, but they're so unbelievably important. We all know some horror story about someone who didn't have the talk about how many children they wanted to have, and then they end up divorcing because someone in that marriage said, actually, I don't want to have children, or I've changed my mind. And that's avoidable if you start forcing early conversations, but we're very British, and I don't think we often like doing that sometimes.
No. And I guess it's I'm reminded of the sentiment of all of Sarah's conferences, and it's about having agency and empowering yourself and giving yourself the confidence and courage to have those conversations, and that's where it starts. Sabrina, what does it look like from the kind of the tax, the planning, the power of attorney? A lot of us will have, with our siblings, parents that are getting to that stage in life where, again, we might avoid those conversations at our peril. What do you see?
So similar. Most of my clients will have done a will either at the time they're getting married or just had children, and then they'll put it in a drawer, and then 20 years later they'll look at their will and think, oh gosh, I need to update that. And then come along and they'll say, oh, I'm too young for a power of attorney. I'll say, oh, do you have assets? Yes. Does anyone else own those assets with you? Like, what happens if you have an accident? Have you got a power of attorney? No, I don't need one of those. Yes, you do. Starting those conversations early. I know, speaking to Rosie earlier, try and work with your financial advisor, and we try and bring those conversations in as soon as possible, as early as possible, to make sure that you put these documents in place, so that if something does happen, the last person you want to be speaking to is me. You want to be speaking to and dealing with your family when these traumatic events happen. So putting them in place as soon as you turn 18 and you own assets, should have a power of attorney. Because if something happens, can't really do anything about it. You've got to go through the court process. It's going to cost you a lot of money that you could have saved.
And it's going to take a long time.
It takes a long time, at least a year. So,
do you have a point of view on, or any guidance on who you should appoint as power of attorney?
Someone you trust. So my standard question is, who would you give your bank card to and say, please, can you just go and get some money for me from my bank? Not supposed to do that, but who would you trust to be in that position? And regularly they'll sort of come out with husband, wife, children, family, friends. Some people appoint a professional where conflicts arise and they need someone else, an independent party, or Blended families, that's one that is a good topic, where there's been a remarriage, different children, suddenly who's controlling the finances becomes a very hot topic that also no one wants to talk about. But it's those conversations, trying to start them earlier with the whole family, get the younger generation involved, get them doing their powers of attorney so they understand what their parents are doing and have some financial responsibility from an earlier age so that they can. I mean, I've watched my parents struggle with my grandparents who didn't understand. It was left too late to put their powers of attorney in place. We got there just in time, but at that stage, it's giving up that control, that self. You've done everything on your own forever, and you feel like can keep doing that, and then suddenly you can't, and you need to ask for help, and you don't want to ask for help. But having those documents in place, so you don't really have to. It's already there. That can be a huge help.
Yeah. So I guess in what you're describing as well, once you've done that, then you've just got control and clarity, and all of those kind of strange conversations that are avoided just go away because it's done. And then you can live your life and enjoy your life, and everybody knows where they stand.
Exactly. I think
perfect.
it's I mean, one of the things that I discuss with my clients when it comes to wills is, so if something happened to you, does anyone know who you bank with, who your utility providers are, where your investments, who's your investment manager, who's your accountant? And most people know. Who owns your house? Don't know. Is it joint ownership? Do you know how? No idea.
Yeah, where are the deeds?
Yeah, where anything.
Yeah.
Which is fine, but if something happened and you do have teenage children and they're suddenly trying to deal with your estate, they're not going to have a clue.
Yeah.
And then you're going to rack up some serious solicitor's bills trying to find out what you own because no one knows. So just the first question I would say is, do you know what you own? Do your children, have they been invited into the sort of financial planning element of your life? Like, do they, I mean, there's an extent that some people like to keep it private, but in terms of just having a list somewhere, or contacts on the fridge, just saying, these are the people, if something happens to me, they're the people you contact, they're the people that will know. And it's not just helping yourself, you're setting them up for their future in terms of their own financial hygiene, but also if something happens to you, it's so traumatic, you're giving them that helping hand, going beyond protecting yourself, going sort of protecting them as well.
Perfect. So thank you both, because I think you've given a great sort of snapshot, even though at a macro level, on the gravity of this, on the kind of the flip side of if you don't have this under control or have a line of sight on your personal situation and the people around you and what the future might look like, you know, there's serious consequences. But equally, I want to turn now to the other side of this equation, which is the all-important life support, I call it, in terms of you can only have those conversations if you arrive at that subject with a degree of emotional fitness, physical fitness, and kind of mental fitness. And so I kind of come straight to Jules, because Jules, I know you're really passionate about challenging the narrative of our health in midlife and being a bit of a myth buster around what we should expect, can expect, and what we can actually change. So can you tell me a little bit more about your philosophy around that and why it's relevant to what we're discussing today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the moment, there's just so many pervasive narratives that are really quite negative for anyone really over 40. This feeling, for a start, of, you know, things will start to go wrong after 40 and you have to learn to live with them. And even going to GPs now, it's really common for my clients to come to me going, well, my GP has just said, well, you know, it's just your age. You've got to learn to live with it. And, you know, this is so wrong for a couple of main reasons. Firstly, it's really disempowering because there's absolutely nothing you can do about the day you were born and how many years you've been on the planet. You know, that just is. So it's really disempowering. But the second point is it's just not true. Or if at best it's partially true. Science is growing so exponentially now because of all the developments, you know, we can see into people's brains now. We can see into people's DNA. And the science is showing that actually what really matters isn't how many years you've been on the planet, it's the biological age of your cells. And that, going back to this idea of agency, is that we have so much more control over that than we're led to believe. And there's been some recent research, and the cohort, in as little as 8 weeks, reversed their biological age of their cells by an average of 3.5 years. In 8 weeks. I mean, this is just astonishing. And some of them reversed it by something like 12, 14 years. That was just the average. So, and this is by really simple food changes, lifestyle changes, mindset changes, all of which we have complete agency over. And this is something anyone can do. It doesn't need fancy schmancy, super, biohacking, nootropics, kind of all that kind of stuff that you see on Instagram. It's really basic, easy stuff that anyone can do really simply. So for me, that's just not only from the science geek in me that will geek out on that epigenetic stuff for forever and the science of longevity, but from the point of view of, what I want is for people to feel, be the person that they want to be so they can live the life that they really want to live. If we're going to be living till 100 and, you set all these great financial things in place and you build the wealth you want to build, but if you're too exhausted to enjoy it, or you've got your Zimmer frame and you can't get out the house, what's the point? So for me, it's all about, again, this idea of being preventative, looking at it sooner rather than later. Because you look at it sooner, it's like, you're catching the little stitch in your favourite jumper. And if you ignore it, your favourite jumper is going to completely unravel over time. And then you're never going to put it back together.
Yeah.
So the sooner you can look at it and start making some really... And it's simpler to do when you go early. It's easier to make small changes every day that can have massive... It's like the compound interest, if you're investing in anything at all, anyone who invests knows the power of compound interest. You might not see the difference from day to day to day, but you look back over the last year, and I get clients doing this all the time. They go, the changes were really, I almost didn't notice I was making them, but now I look back and it's like, oh my God, look how far I've come. I used to eat like that and now I eat like this. And I used to look like that and now I look and feel like this. And I didn't really notice the changes I was making. They were effortless. And these are like busy professional people who haven't got time to be on hugely restrictive diets or go off to kind of spas and, the other side of the world to detox.
Yeah.
This is just basic stuff that anyone can do.
So, and I know those plans are very bespoke because it's all about the individual's physiology, context, lifestyle, stressors, micro stressors, big stressors. So I know you work in a very individualized manner. But I'm also aware that, there's a booming industry of wearable tech where everyone I know has either got the Whoop thing on or a Zeo patch or an Aura ring, and they're looking at the data and they're monitoring it. So tell me the difference in terms of what that provides me versus the kind of, what you're suggesting in your practice and advisory and support work.
Yeah, there's really good and bad about the wearables. I mean, I've got them, I use them, but there's a real difference between something becoming, it's about whether you are using something as a tool and you are the master and that is the tool, or it's becoming the master of you. And what I see from so many people when they use these, trackers and wearables and devices, it's becoming a distraction. Whereas where the benefit is in the personalization of an approach, which is really important because there's so much advice out there that gets really confusing for a lot of people. And people come to me all the time going, I'm just so confused with all this advice. But it's generic. So it might be very good for a certain person, and there's always some science behind it, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's right for you. So understanding your own body and your own personal responses, and we're all different. We have different responses to stress. Like everybody knows the person in their life that has no problem being half an hour late for everything. And the person in your life that likes to be half an hour early for everything. And, that's about different personal tolerance to stress. And we have different responses to sugar. We have different blood sugar responses. Again, if I don't eat every 4 hours, I'm going to be falling over and hallucinating. But, I know I've got a best friend who can go without food all day. That's about individual blood sugar response. And where these devices are great is that it goes over what I've used in my practice for years, which is actually just writing stuff down, write down how you're feeling, what you're eating, but actually these are a way of getting really nice little fancy charts to show what that response is. And when it helps you understand what's actually going on in your body, but the important distinction is, and it encourages you to take action, then that's where the magic happens. Whereas for most people, it's not about taking action, it's about a nice, fancy, snazzy looking, modern, show-offable distraction.
We had to make my brother take his watch off, because every time someone said, "How did you sleep?" he'd be like,
Exactly.
"Not very well, actually."
And then do you ask him his readiness score?
Everyone got so bored of it. They were like, "Just take that off."
Yeah,
you're not
yeah.
you're not answering the question. You're like you're just parroting back what's something that isn't. Even if it is accurate, it's also about how you feel and not just what the data says. So we made him take it off.
Exactly. And I don't blame you, because the number of people that have said, I wake up in the morning and I feel great. And I look at my watch and it tells me I had a really shitty night's sleep. So now I feel really crap.
That would have been me yesterday.
But also, I just think, when we're kids, my son, if I ever say to him, go to bed or eat more vegetables or it's time to get up, they rebel against it. We spend half our life rebelling against being told what to do. And yet we spend fortunes on fancy devices which do exactly that.
Yeah.
Beep us notifications saying, "Oh, you should be starting to get ready for bed now," or "Oh, have more steps," and they're beeping at us all day long. So I don't want to be told what to do by a device, and I don't think anyone else really should do. Once we understand our own bodies, I want everyone to get to the point where what you're doing and what you're eating is so effortless, it's just part of what you do. Because we're all too busy in life to be spending our time weighing out our food or weighing ourselves or worrying about what we should and shouldn't eat. When your body naturally knows we've just been giving it the wrong triggers for too long. And if you can just unravel some of that, then you get to the point where,
It becomes natural.
It's just really natural and instinctive. And it's a way of being rather than a thing you have to do to yourself. Because, for women in particular, I find we can get a little bit sort of self-abusive almost and self-flagellating over the way we eat and the way we live.
And the way we look.
I'm really naughty, and the way we look.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be that way.
So it doesn't have to be that way. So I'm going to move to another pioneer now that is myth-busting in the very particular area of divorce. And I know, Chloe, the general perception of this area, whether we're about to embark upon divorce, we're in divorce, or we've been divorced, is a bit of a shit show, and it's a train wreck of a journey. But it can be. You have a very different viewpoint on the process, the possibilities, and the outcomes in a very different and refreshing way. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, a lot of what Jules was saying kind of resonated with me around the mindset and this idea that we have, of divorce being a failure or being something that is necessarily traumatic and warlike. I'm not sure if you can all hear me. And so, I think if you're thinking about planning for the future, in a lot of ways, making that decision to divorce is a way of planning for your future, because you're looking at your life as it stands today and saying, can I continue to live this way? Do I enjoy the way my life is set up? Do I like the people who are in it? Mm-hmm. And is this where I want to be? And what we're seeing is, if we look at statistics, there was a recent article in the New York Times that was showing statistics from some research that showed that since 1990, divorce rates among 50-year-old plus have doubled, and 65-year-old plus have tripled. Wow. And that's because as our life expectancy is extending, people are reconsidering. And, they've got 20, 30, 40 years ahead of them, and they take the time to think, do I really want to spend them with this person? And, it may be yes, which is wonderful, but in some cases it is no. And I think that a lot of people are starting to shift their mindset and realizing that actually there's a lot of hope involved in making the decision to divorce, because you are hoping for a better life. You know that you want more, that you deserve more. And so it's a very courageous act. And that's really my mission, is to help people to see and experience divorce as an opportunity for growth, an opportunity to reinvent themselves. And the reason why I care so deeply about that is because that's been my experience. When I got divorced about 10 years ago, it was perceived by people around me, and probably by myself as well, as a bit of a disaster. Oh my God, what am I going to do? I was only 35, I had 2 little kids. What happens now? Yeah. And actually, to my own surprise, it ended up being an opportunity to blossom. I completely rediscovered myself. Because we divorced amicably, I didn't empty my bank account. We weren't, in terrible, acrimonious terms. Our children weren't traumatized from the experience. And I was able to focus my energy, my money, my time on building my next chapter. And really thinking about, who did I want to be? Where did I want to be, in a number of years? And the person I was at that stage was very different to the 25-year-old who had met my husband. And so it gave me that opportunity to reset my life in a way that really you only really get if you do a radical career change, or you move abroad, or something along those lines. But it's not very often in life that you get to just click the reset button and start again. And for me, it was an absolutely eye-opening experience. I reconnected with old hobbies. I met somebody new. I made new friends. I discovered a whole lot of things that I was not necessarily open to before. And I believe that that is an experience that people can have if they focus their energy on the future and that future version of themselves rather than the past.
Yeah. There's elements of what you do, though, as well, I know, because again, that's kind of that's embracing the future as an individual, kind of looking at the horizon line. But I know when we spoke, there was a lot of what you mentioned, which was kind of not only holding up the mirror to your clients, but also allowing them to preempt kind of perceptions and assumptions about the process and avoid the pitfalls and the hurdles that really can be bruising. So I know in your practice, you're actually pretty challenging to people and go, well, might not work like that. Or have you looked at this perspective? So can you talk a little bit about that? And then I think we've got 3 minutes to round up.
Yeah, it really is about changing people's mindset. And there's a big transition that happens during divorce, which is you're no longer thinking about you and your spouse. You're thinking of you and your kids. But it's no longer about the other person. Mm-hmm. And shifting that mindset and trying to plan for your life, the life that you want for you and your children, irrelevant of what the other person ends up doing.
Yeah.
That's where that forward-looking exercise is so important. And one of the very common mistakes that people make during divorce is they don't think long-term.
Right.
They think that, they plan for their current situation, and they don't know what's going to happen when the children grow up. They haven't planned for what happens if they remarry. All of that hasn't been taken into account. And so really trying to think about your life in the long term, making sure that the agreements you reach allow you to start your next chapter on solid foundations.
Perfect. Can I come in,
Really,
Claire? Thank you.
yeah.
You're reaching for the mic. I know we've got the divorce lawyer. What's the view of the divorce lawyer on the divorce
It's a really
coach?
boring point, but I cannot tell you, all my female clients focus on staying in the home.
Oh, yes.
His pension, whatever, I don't need that. I'll offset it. I want the home. Women really, really think, particularly, it's funny, sorry men, but you're all like obsessed with your pensions, and women just, they let it go
so
in
true,
favour
though.
of the family home. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong, because often, you want stability for your children, and it's certainly like a completely normal emotional response. But as Chloe has just said, and I find this, trying to encourage people to think longer term, because that pension comes into play before you know it. Don't let go. Don't just write off the pension in favour of the now and the stability, because I often find my clients go through, for example, a real sticking point where they think, I must stay in the home, I must stay in the home. Not wrong, and also, stamp duty and all those things, but then they aren't able to think about the fact that a fresh start, including for children, is not necessarily a bad thing and can be very helpful in the longer term. Everyone's situation is different, so you've got to tailor it to you. But it is exactly what I find that Chloe is saying, and I do think if you're getting divorced, of course, you often just do need a lawyer. I would always say you need a lawyer because it's actually something that needs to be properly documented with the court at the end of the day. Find a lawyer you like and trust, but get some help around the sides, therapy, divorce coaching, because the lawyer is not always best placed to try and project you forward to your future life, but the coaches and the therapists are.
So it's the combination, sorry, Chloe, so it's the combination of the practical, the technical, and the vital signs, the support. And I'm sorry to cut you off, but I know we're sort of, there's so much that could be talked about here. And I don't know whether we've got time for a question. No, sorry, we don't. There are 4. I love to be told what to do. But we've got some really juicy questions that we knew wanted to be asked. So I would just encourage people to go and speak to Chloe and to Claire and Sabrina and Jules, because I think what we've offered, and thank you, is a number of key points. Is let's talk about it earlier, sooner rather than later. Let's get the technical expertise, but let's make sure we're in the right state of mind and health to really prepare for those conversations and live the life we want to lead. So thank you very much to my panellists.
Thank you, Annie.